And it's important to keep an eye on Yoshi P's t-shirt choice. That is a very good point as well, because if you're not familiar with FanFests, Yoshi P wears a shirt that highlights what is happening in terms of, he tries to give as subtle hint as possible in terms of, it's mainly around jobs. So for example, at the FanFest in London in 2014, he wore a Batman t-shirt, which signified the Dark Knight, and he's like, I love Batman. But it's subtle hints like that, and he's been doing it at every other FanFest ever since, so he's been getting more and more tricky with it the last few years. So I'm looking forward to see what kind of shirt he has, and if we don't get a job announcement at NA Fanfest, I assume the shirt is going to be a hint to what it is. So I'm assuming we're going to be able to figure it out rather effectively. The community has become very accustomed to analyzing his shirt choices. I'm assuming this is near the venue, actually. I'm assuming the convention center is nearby. This is why this is here. Or it's over a freeway or something, I'm not really sure. But they're starting to dress up Las Vegas as far as I can see with all the branding. It's a shame they didn't put the, have you heard of the critically acclaimed MMORPG Final Fantasy XIV? I would have liked to have seen that. But it is nice to see branding like that. And branding like that is not cheap, let me tell you. Branding like that costs thousands, well, dollars in this case. It costs thousands of dollars to do branding like that. So they're sparing no expense in doing the branding for this. Okay, so I've been looking primarily at the schedules and comparing the schedule for Las Vegas 2023 with the last FanFest that happened in Las Vegas, which was 2018. 5 years. COVID really did a number on us, didn't it? So let's start. The schedule is pretty much the same, but I haven't read it through fully. I've been primarily looking at the times because I want to see if there's any difference in terms of the times. So let's start with day one. So we have the keynote address, which is Naoki Yoshida and the others. He's more than likely going to be cosplayed at this point, so he'll take the stage in a cosplay of some kind. More than likely he's going to be a paladin this time. And then he'll come back on stage after with the t-shirt. Comparing that to 2018, it's actually a half hour longer than the previous FanFest, which is good. I suppose they just need to cram a lot more in, at least I hope that's the case, or they're giving themselves a bit more buffer room. So it's a half hour longer, which is great news. I'd say Ben and everybody else who's going, try and get a good seat for it. The keynote address is something you want a good seat for. Okay, so the welcome ceremony in 2018 lasted for 15 minutes. It's primarily just like a meet and greet. They all come on stage, hello, hello, stuff like that, and like welcome to FanFest, and then everybody just starts running around, going crazy. The opening ceremony is actually 15 minutes longer this time around. So the attending guests from Final Fantasy XIV development and operations teams arrive to greet attendees and kick off the show. It's essentially no different. It's the same thing, but it is 15 minutes longer. So I think it's primarily to give themselves some buffer room, because if I recall with Paris FanFest, they were running into scheduling issues because they did start trying to cram things in because they started running out of time in their panels. So I'd imagine they've just, this time they're just saying, you know what, let's give ourselves as much latitude as we can. Then you have a Realm Revisited. So in celebration of the upcoming 10th anniversary, the North American community team looks back at the impactful updates made to Final Fantasy XIV over the years. From grandiose moments to community memes. I imagine there's going to be a lot of memes to share. I'm looking forward to that. So enjoy this walk down memory lane. I'm looking forward to that. So all of these are going to be streamed. So the keynote, the opening ceremony, and the Realm Revisited are more than likely going to be streamed. Considering there's 3 FanFests, and if the model follows and we may get 1 or 2 jobs, I imagine the jobs would follow in Europe and Japan, because they have to give Europe and Japan something. So whether or not we get a job introduction, it's up in the air. They could do actually a job reveal and then skip over Europe entirely. It's not the first time we've gotten the short end of the stick, so that's neither here nor there though. Now, let's look at the rest of 2023. Let's see what the story is. Glamour to life. We've invited cosplayers of all skill levels to strut their stuff on stage for everyone to see. Come enjoy the pageantry and dedication on display. Now, I quickly wanted to talk about this actually, because for people who attend a lot of FanFest, you'll notice that there's a lot of cosplay going on. It's like Comic-Con in a lot of ways. You'll see a lot of cosplay. Now, one thing that we were wondering when we found out that the tickets were going to be a lottery and then it's first come, first served afterwards, and there was very few tickets. We were wondering how many of the hardcore cosplayers, like the people who will go above and beyond in their cosplay, will miss out on the opportunity to attend this FanFest. Like some of the people who have won the contests in previous years, would they have even gotten a ticket? So it made me and my friends wonder, will the cosplay scene look different in NA, EU and even Japan? Because a lot of the cosplayers more than likely didn't actually get a ticket. So I'll be interested to see what the cosplay concert is going to be like, or the cosplay competition is going to be like. I have no doubt a bunch of $1,000 cosplayers didn't make it. Beauregard, I have no doubt about that. Like, remember the Phoenix? I don't even know if she actually got in. I haven't talked to her in a while, but I don't even know if she got into this FanFest. So I'd be interested to see if she actually got in or not. But yeah, a lot of cosplayers I do know actually did get tickets for EU. So then it ends with a piano performance, which is a highlight of every FanFest, a piano performance. I'm personally looking forward to EU because I'm hoping beyond hope that Benjamin Nuts is going to be the piano performer. I really, really hope he is, because I love his work. Reminisce on past adventures and enjoy the mesmerizing melodies of FF14 in this piano concert performed by Keiko. To ensure that all attendees can enjoy the concert without distraction, video or audio recording during the performance is strictly prohibited. Now, you can treat this like an orchestra performance. Everybody's going to be quiet, nobody's going to be jumping around doing mad things, so they'll be able to identify real quick if you're taking pictures and stuff like that. So, day 2 is the live letter from the producer. Now, this live letter is primarily going to be information regarding patch 6.5. They may include some things about the graphic updates and stuff like that, but I'd imagine most of that would be included in the keynote address. So that's going to be fully streamed as well. I'm looking forward to watching that. The Crystalline Conflict Regional Championship 2023 North America. 4 semi-finalist teams bring the excitement to the main stage of Fan Festival to battle it out to see who claims North American Champion title. Alright, I'm just going to say it. I don't mind PvP in FF14, but what I do mind is the flagrant abuse that PvP gets in FF14. Like, there's a lot of win sharing, for example. Like, the community is just so small that they're able to win share. Like, it's been happening for years and it's still happening, regardless of what people say. People will say it doesn't happen. In 2023, I've still seen it happen. At least in EU, I've seen it happen. I'm hoping this turns out to be really good, but at the same time, I'm just wondering, like, I'm hoping this is all legitimate. So I don't even know how they did this. I wasn't really keeping an eye on it, so I'm hoping it works out well. I hope the participants have a great time as well, but I hope they put on a good show, because PvP is not an interesting thing to watch in FF14 in my opinion. Then there's another event called Speaking the Language of Creation, which is, I'm assuming, a sit down with developers. So English localization lead Kate Sweener, I think, sorry if I butchered your name, offers a glimpse behind the scenes into how the team uses language to give life to FF14's myriad realms, and the key role of collaboration in bringing Endwalker's expansive story to global audiences. Also, Koji Fox will be there for some reason. I remember this comment. Yeah, that was a funny comment. Yeah, language is a good point. Like, they have tried to bring proper accents to FF14 for a long time. They wanted every zone, every realm, every nation to have its own specific accents. Then FanFest ends with the Primals in live concerts, which is an amazing experience. If you're attending FanFest, I highly recommend that you go down to the main floor and participate there, because the atmosphere around you when everybody is so hyped is amazing. Like, all my friends go down to the main stage and participate in the Primals concert, because it's so much more lively than sitting in the stands. Also, I will recommend, if you plan to do that, or even if you're sitting in the bleachers, earplugs. I couldn't recommend earplugs more, because these things got so freaking loud. And especially for me, I have tinnitus. So if you're going to be especially standing down there, earplugs are brilliant, because they're going to drown out a lot of the really loud stuff, but you'll still get the full experience. So me and my friends were always doing that. Like, somebody was handing out earplugs as soon as we were down there, and we're just like, yes. The main reason I wanted to do this stream in the first place is because one of the main things we're always looking forward to with FanFests, aside from information about the new expansion's plot, story, and developments and changes, are new jobs. People are fascinated about new jobs. So am I. Blitzballer, physical range. Tansy, you're not alone in that. People still think Blitzballer is a high possibility. So I'm just going to really quick open the 3 videos that I created, because as I said, I created these I think almost 2 years ago. Yeah, I made 3 videos. Next ranged, next tank, next caster. All the sports animations in Hildy give me hope for Blitzballer. That's a very good point as well, because how many animations with that ball actually happened? So that might have been a subtle hint as well. That's a very good point. I'm going to go over my guesses that were in these videos as well, and keep in mind I made these videos well over a year ago. So specifically in June 17th, 2022 is when I made these videos. This first video, now specifically what I did with these videos, if you haven't seen them yet, I analysed all of the jobs that we currently had, and I analysed all the jobs that could possibly be, and I put it down to 2 guesses per video. So I guessed 1 job based on jobs in the Final Fantasy series, both past and present. And I also did a job based on the MMO genre in general, taking inspiration from other games. So there was 2 jobs in each video, ones I thought were the most likely candidates at the time. Yeah, so here's how the jobs were actually added. So this is my criteria for actually adding things in. So here are all the jobs we've gotten around Reborn at the launch, including Ninja, which was launched halfway through. Heaven's Ward, we got 3, but one of these, according to Myth, was actually supposed to be in here, so that's why there was 3. Then we got Samurai and Red Mage and Stormblood, Gunbreaker and Dancer and Shadowbringers, and then finally Sage and Reaper in Endwalker. This is what made me think that Caster and Ranged were the most likely candidates for the next job to actually come in. But there's also armors to think about, because the Ninja's armors, the scouting armor sets, are only occupied by Ninja at the moment. So there's definitely a gap, despite the fact that we already got another melee in the Reaper. There's definitely a gap for somebody else to wear the scouting set. But I have a couple of theories that I've already put into these videos, but I have a theory for another job, a ranged job, that I'm going to talk about after I do these. So the first job that I wanted to talk about was the Time Mage. Time Mage was a difficult pick for me, primarily because I've said it in the video as well, that Time Mage is not a class that would work properly in an MMORPG. It worked in Final Fantasy Tactics, which is a turn-based combat system, so it worked perfectly there. But it wouldn't work like that in an MMORPG, especially FF14, because as I said in the video, everything relies on rotations and being static in those rotations. So like 120 seconds, then you have your new buffs and so on. All the jobs have to sync up. If you introduce a Time Mage that ruined that sync, it would cause nothing but anarchy. So that was my opinion why it wouldn't work. But it still was a likely class in my mind, but just without the gimmicks of being able to speed up at slow time. It would still do that, but just under the premise of using time magic to debilitate their foes. Same way that a black mage uses fire magic and thunder magic and ice magic. So it uses time to damage enemies, the use of bubble AoE shields, similar to Y'shtola really. Caster with procs similar to Dancer, and then procs lose potency every second. These are just my guesses of what I thought could actually be a good idea for Time Mage. Just based on the Final Fantasy series, Time Mage was my main guess for our next caster. and it still is in a lot of ways. As I've stated in many videos and in these videos, they're scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to jobs inspired directly by jobs in the Final Fantasy series, which is why I made these videos outlining one in the series and one not in the series. So Time Mage was my first one, and I'm sticking with Time Mage. If we're going to get a caster, I'm sticking with Time Mage. Now, in terms of its weapon, because I needed to give it a proper weapon, I chose the bell. The bell is a weapon that actually exists in Final Fantasy XI as well. It's used by the Geomancer. Now, Geomancer was also high on my list. In the end, I just didn't go for it. But the bell, in my opinion, is one of my main guesses for a weapon that a Time Mage could use. Yeah, I just wanted to go with something unique, and the bell just seemed right. It just felt right to me. My theory is an elementalist Geomancer type caster job that uses druid aesthetic like Conjurer had. Green Mage is a possible name, or druid wands. Tansy, you may not be well off the mark because a lot of the community would actually be behind you, and I'm sure everybody in this chat, a lot of people in the chat will probably say Geomancer is a very likely option. And to be honest, it probably is just as likely. I just weighed between Time Mage and Geomancer and I settled on Time Mage. But yeah, Geomancer is just as likely in my opinion. So we may see Geomancer, but I'm sticking with Time Mage as my personal guess. Now, onto my caster choice based on the MMORPG genre. So I looked at the entire genre, all the different games, the popular games like Guild Wars 2, and a lot of the older MMORPGs in particular, the ones that had a lot of classes. The Necromancer was my guess for a job based on other classes in the MMORPG genre. Like, there's a Necromancer in EverQuest, the Guild Wars series, Dark Age of Camelot, Age of Conan, and a lot of other MMORPG games. Now, my guess for this type of job, so if I just skip over a few of these things, it uses void magic to cause harm to enemies, manipulate lesser void send, and specializes in dot spells and abilities. Now, as I said, I made this video a long time ago. I'm still favoring Necromancer as a job not based on the Final Fantasy series, because we have seen Necromancer before in game as an NPC. But it's also the fact that since they changed Summoner, as some of you have already pointed out, they changed Summoner, and now there's no dot specific class anymore. So there is room for a new dot class, and a Necromancer could be that sort of job to have mainly dots. We've been seeing they are less, they don't like dots as much as they used to. They haven't been adding new dots in as much as they've been taking them away. Summoner got absolutely butchered by that. Summoner, I haven't really played it that much lately. It's a nice job. I like the way it is now, but a lot of people don't. People miss the dots, but it is what it is. So Necromancer is my second guess, and my guess for a unique weapon was the Spell Blade. I feel like Necromancer is still a never ever, because the 3 bosses in the Hero's Gauntlet seem to represent 3 jobs we'll never get. You're not wrong about that, primarily because those jobs represent aspects of jobs that we already have. Like Berserker, we're likely never going to get, primarily because most of the Berserker's toolkit, I've said this a million times, most of the Berserker's toolkit lore development went into the creation of the Warrior, because the Warrior in FF14 is completely different from the Warrior of the series. Others have also said Spellblade as a name for the class too. I haven't actually heard that, Becky. Spellblade as a class name would actually make a lot of sense as well. It is a nice name. My only concern is it would be very much like a red mage. That's a lot of people's fears about stuff like that, which is why I tied the Spellblade to the Necromancer. Now we're going to move on to the next video, which is the tank. 2 of the videos I considered to be the most likely jobs to be added to FF14, the new caster and a new ranged. If not 2 of them, at least one of those. I added tank as a third just in case, because I had some good ideas about tank as well. But as you can see, we got a tank last in Shadowbringers. There is technically room for it, but I'm not fully sold on it yet. My first choice for a tank, because we already have 4 tanks. We have the Warrior, we have the Paladin, we have the Dark Knight, and we have the Gunbreaker. A lovely mix of 4 different jobs that all have their own unique identities. They're all unique enough from one another that they're easily recognizable from one another, which is what you want. They have unique weapons, unique fighting style, so you can instantly recognize as soon as you see one going, that's a Warrior, that's a Dark Knight, that's a Gunbreaker. My first choice for a tank, based on the Final Fantasy series, is the Beastmaster. Now, the reason I chose Beastmaster is primarily because of the Shadowbringers expansion. So, for those of you who played through Shadowbringers, and especially through the Bostia content in the Southern Front, you may recognize this figure here, whose name is Leon Bramhelsos, if that's how I remember his full name correctly. And he's a Beastmaster. And Beastmasters was a pleasant surprise for a lot of us to see on the field of battle in Bostia. These were combatants that utilized a axe and a shield, although some of them had a mixture of weapons as well. Some of them looked like scholars with a book. But that was the main gimmick, mainly from Leon. And their entire gimmick was the manipulation of a beast creature. In Leon's case, he had multiple beasts that he could summon at any given time. I had originally thought about a new melee as being a Beastmaster, but a tank does sound really good in my eyes for a new... Well, a Beastmaster tank does sound amazing in my eyes. It sounds amazing in my eyes. That sounds amazing, doesn't it? You want a Dawan mount? Yeah, I think everybody... I missed this model. He was a really good model. I loved the Bostia Southern Front. Like, I ran Castrum Lactus Latour 50 times for that tile. And I never even wore the tile. I ran it because that content was amazing. I loved Lactus Latour because it brought everybody together. And everybody was running that content. So as a result, I got very familiar with this fight. And I miss it. I miss this fight. But Beastmaster is my main guess of a new tank if we're ever going to get one. Either in this expansion or even the next expansion. If we ever get more jobs like that. My idea for the Beastmaster, if I can find the freaking thing. So, commands their... Oh, yeah. So, this is what my main gimmick of this, right? So, I was thinking about the Beastmaster, and I was like, alright, they could add a run-of-the-mill Beastmaster, but I had my own idea of what they could do for a Beastmaster. And my idea was this. Instead of utilizing multiple beasts, allowing us to tame beasts or anything like that, which is likely not going to happen, my idea was that they would instead utilize our Chocobo companion. Because if they added Beastmaster in, eventually somebody would have to teach us the Beastmaster arts. And they had their own beast. And they go, right, you're going to need a beast of your own in order for me to train you. Wait, you seem to have a Chocobo with you, that'll do. Okay, I'm going to teach you and you're going to utilize your Chocobo. But my main idea for this was twofold. The first one is because it sounded cool. But the second one is because it would give them an excuse to overhaul the Chocobo companion system. Now, my idea for this job is that only this job would actually utilize the special combat of the Chocobo. If you didn't use that job, your Chocobo would act the same way as it always did, as it currently does in game. But my idea is a commands their Chocobo companion in combat would have access to much more control over said companion. Abilities and skills would work similar to how Summoner and Scholar pets work now, which is expected, they're mostly automated. Would have a degree of customization and uniqueness expected of similar taming jobs via the Chocobo barding and dies. That was my main criteria. Like, people would want to customize their companion in some way. And I thought about it and just going, what's an easy way for the developers to add a beast in that to be able to easily customize? And then it just immediately jumped to the Chocobo, because the Chocobo already has a system in game where you can change the color and you can change how it looks with bardings. So that to me sounded like an amazing thing to tie in with Beastmaster, to have them fighting with our loyal Chocobo companion who has for the most part been ignored. Like, the Chocobo hasn't really changed since A Realm Reborn. It's still essentially the same system since A Realm Reborn. Hasn't changed at all. I leveled it up years ago, like about 3 expansions ago, and it hasn't changed since, in my eyes. Which is unfortunate. I really wish they'd pay more attention to it, which is why I brought up this, because I wanted them to just focus on that. Now, as you can see with Leon, for example, his weapons of choice was a one-handed axe and a shield on one hand. Not a huge shield, just like almost like a buckler. I also saw someone talk about Beastmaster in the limited job situation like Blue Mage. That's very correct. Like, a lot of people were thinking Beastmaster would make a great limited job, similar to what Blue Mage is, because Blue Mage wouldn't fit as a normal job because it's massively overpowered. I had originally considered, like a lot of people, that Beastmaster could be a limited job that would allow you to go out and tame beasts. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it would be a lot of work for the developers to add a Beastmaster limited job like that in, and then create a whole new system for you to be able to go out into the world and tame monsters. So to me it sounded like a lot of work, and then I just realized, like, are the developers even going to have the patience or the time to do it? So, which is why I settled on this. I really hope it's not limited either. I really don't want it to be limited. It also makes sense in my mind to have the Beastmaster wield a one-handed axe and a shield, because right now only Paladin uses his shield, which is a loss in my opinion. Like, having a second job wield a shield would be amazing. So having these two share the shield would be, in my opinion, good. Although it would break certain items, because a lot of items that drop a shield these days drop so in a package with a one-handed sword. That is my job based on the Final Fantasy series for the next tank. Now, in terms of a job to be added based on the MMORPG genre for the next tank, my choice was the Shaman. Now, I thought about the Shaman a lot based on other games. I used to main the Shaman for years in WoW back in the day, long before even 1.0. And I just thought to myself, there's a gap for a Shaman. Like, it could utilize earth and nature elements for attack and defense. Use their weapon to channel the elements and empower themselves. Like, similar tanks already do the same. Able to deploy pillar objects to act as a group defensive cooldown. Now, this was my main thing about them. I wanted this Shaman to have a gimmick. Like, all the other tanks have a gimmick of some kind. My gimmick for the Shaman was have the ability to deploy a defensive object. So to be able to click and just deploy like a pillar that people would be able to use as a line of sight defense. So that was my gimmick for Shaman in terms of a unique tank in my eyes. So yeah, that's my idea for Shaman. Now, in terms of, did I actually tell the weapon? Yeah, I think my weapon choice for Shaman was a two-handed hammer. The main reason I said two-handed hammer for this Shaman is because I was used to a two-handed Shaman hammer in WoW back in vanilla. It was great in PvP. I loved it. You were just one-shotting people almost. But it's also mainly because I want a hammer in FF14, and I can't see anything other than right now a tank using a two-handed hammer, and it's unique enough from the other jobs. Like, the other jobs don't have hammers, and we are desperately missing a hammer job in FF14. People have been begging the developers, just going, would you add a hammer job, please, for the love of Hydaelyn, add a job that wields a hammer. So I want Shaman. If Shaman or something like it ends up being the next tank job, I want them to wield a hammer. Beyond anything. We're so overdue. As Beauregard is saying there, we're overdue a hammer. We're so overdue. And it would make a very unique and recognizable weapon series. So, those are my two picks for the next tank. So, let's get to my two main picks for range jobs in Final Fantasy XIV. As you can see, we have the 3 ranged jobs that we have in the game at the moment. We had Bard, which was added in A Realm Reborn. Then you have the Machinist added in Heaven's Ward, and finally the Dancer, which was added in Shadowbringers. A great mix of 3 different jobs, each unique enough from each other with unique weapon series. There is a lot of room for new jobs to be added in here. Now, my pick for a job of ranged DPS, physical ranged, based on the Final Fantasy series, was a controversial one. Like, people looked at it and just going, wait, what? You're picking that? But the main reason I picked it is because I needed to pick a job that was unique enough from the other 3. And looking at the Final Fantasy series as my first pick, I couldn't really pick one that sounded better than my pick, which was the Chemist. Now you're probably going, wait, Chemist? Okay. Chemist, for a long time, was people's main pick, and it was even my main pick. It was my theory that in the moments before Sage was actually shown on screen, that we were going to get Chemist, because everybody was talking about Chemist for the months before Sage was announced. And then the moment the trailer came up and we're like, oh, it's Sage, okay, and wielding some very unique weapons by the looks of it, Chemist is still near and dear to everybody's heart. Now, the main reason I picked it here is because I don't think we're going to get another healer. We only got a healer in the last expansion. But I tried to think about Chemist and tried to think about a very unique way of adding it as a physical ranged. And I think the method I came up for adding it was actually pretty nice. So what this Chemist would do is it utilizes the mix ability to combine items and or abilities for extra or new effects. Now, as you may be familiar with from the mix ability in the Final Fantasy series, the mix ability allows you to take one item, mix it with another item, and then utilize it to have either both of its effects, a new unique effect, or just elevated effects from one or the other. That wouldn't really work for us in an MMORPG like Final Fantasy XIV, the same way the Time Mage wouldn't work. So I had to think about it. And I thought about it, and I decided on the ability of mixing can produce extra weapon damage or damage in buffs, allowing for a variety in playstyle. Like, they can mix up a concoction that they give to their allies, or throw at their allies, that gives them a big buff. Similar to how a dancer's dance gives them a buff, and all the other ranged have a buff. Or they could also debilitate their enemies with the same concoctions. But where it came into its own is, okay, let's assume for a minute that Chemist would be the next ranged DPS. They're going to have to be a physical range of some kind. They're going to have a weapon that will attack. And I thought about it, and then Final Fantasy IX jumped into my head, and then I was like, Garnet. And I'm like, that's it. That is the weapon. And I was like, this is what set Chemist in my mind as a very, in my opinion, likely pick for a new physical ranged. And that weapon is the Racket. Now, the Racket is a recurring weapon from the series, as you can see here. It primarily made its main showing in, I think, the Tactics series and in Final Fantasy IX. Now, what this does is essentially just allows them to throw items, or in the case of a spellcaster who's holding it, they're able to throw a magical sphere, or just like a magical projectile, essentially. But what I thought about with the Chemist was, alright, they'll utilize items, they'll mix up their item, then they'll use the Racket to throw the item at the enemy, or throw the item at their allies in order to launch the buff. Because they need to, instead of running over to their enemies or the ally, because they need to stay at ranged, they need the ability to deliver their items to the front line. And the Racket, in my opinion, is a great pick, because it allows them to do ranged attacks and stay at ranged. And to be honest, Chemist in my mind is still a great pick for me for physical ranged, although a lot of people don't agree with me, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of you watching now are just going, I don't believe in this either, which is fair. I mean, it is an outlandish pick, but in the end I had to pick a job from the Final Fantasy series first that could fit into Final Fantasy XIV as a ranged physical DPS that would be unique enough from the other 3 that we already have. And the other 3 that we already have cover a lot of the bases. That is the issue. These 3 cover a lot of the bases. So there's very limited room in the Final Fantasy series for a unique role, which is why I went with the Chemist. Bombardier uses a racket to toss explosives. That's also another likely option. The ability to throw explosives with a racket. Now, onto my other pick. Now, my other pick had, even though it's based on the MMORPG genre in general, this pick also has roots in Final Fantasy XIV. And I'll explain those as I've already explained them in the video. My pick for the next ranged, based on the MMORPG genre and inspired by Final Fantasy XIV, is the Ranger. Now, the Ranger job is one of the most popular jobs in the MMORPG genre. As you can see here, the Ranger class from Black Desert Online, the Ranger class in Guild Wars 2, primarily bow wielders. However, the Ranger idea I have for my job in Final Fantasy XIV is a Ranger utilizing a gun, or a long-range rifle, for example. Now, I have a primary reason for thinking this, so let me explain that here. So let me look at this. So, a physical ranged equipped with a rifle or a musket. I really like the idea of a musket, because guns are sorely missed in Final Fantasy XIV. You only really see the Guardians using them and their gun blades primarily. Would have a slower rate of attack compared to other physical range, but increased potency. That was my gimmick for them, to make them stand out from the other jobs, is that they would have a slower rate of attack, but they'd have increased potency as a result. I modeled them mainly on the Machinist from Heaven's Ward, which, if you remember, during Heaven's Ward, the Machinist had casts rather than just instant attacks. So all their rotation attacks all had a cast bar, similar to a caster. Now, the main reason I picked this, as I said, because it's unique enough, is because you've likely already been here before. And if you look at the Coral Tower from the outside, you'll notice that it's dressed up very uniquely. For example, you have the Marauder symbol, which is over here, and then you have this musket symbol, which is over here. Now, and you notice that it's decorated with muskets on the outside. So, the people in A Realm Reborn always assumed that these meant that we were going to get another ranged DPS job, and it's likely going to be a musketeer or a corsair, similar to what Burgat just said there. Corsair was a high pick for in a lot of people's minds for a new job coming up because of the pirate theme of Limsa Laminsa. Now, if you look in here, the Coral Tower is a largely incomplete area from its switch from 1.0 to 2.0. And you'll see this here, right? I'll show you with the layout of this entire area. So over here, you have the Marauders Guild desks. So you have the Marauders all here, you have the Marauder Guild receptionist over here, and all the Marauder weapons and themes in the background. Then you look over the other side, and take a look at this as well. Like, you have the Marauder symbol standing here. And then if you look over here, there's a gun standard standing here, similar, and an empty desk. That was my main theory, and a lot of people's main theories, for the idea that we're going to get another ranged DPS, and it's going to be a gun wielder. Because look at the walls, for crying out loud. Alright, I should really zoom in. The walls are decorated with muskets. We've never seen an NPC use a musket in game, as far as I'm aware. But the fact that they're lining the walls and the outside of the building and downstairs shows that these weapons exist in lore in game. These weapons are real. And this is my theory for why I think Ranger is going to be the next job to be added to FF14. Because they had the idea of adding this, it ended up turning into the Machinist. But in a lot of people's minds, the Machinist is not the gun-wielding job they wanted. And it's, despite the fact that they wield a gun, they're all about the mechanics and the machines. Sorry, I bumped my mic there. So they're not exactly a pure gun wielder like a Corsair or a sniper, kind of like ranger. But let me show you downstairs as well. But you can see here, look, the symbols and all here as well. So you had the marauder over here, and then you had whatever this gun wielding job is here. The whole tower is decorated for 2 distinct classes or jobs, and one of them we never got, primarily I think because of time constraints, or they just couldn't fit it into the game because they already had Bard. Now if you look down here, it's readily apparent that this area was designed for both of the classes to actually hang out. You have the marauders over this side combined with the yellow jackets, all the axes here, and then you look over the other side, all the muskets on the walls and people practicing their gunmanship against these targets here. These yellow jackets look like they were just added after the fact in order to try and fill out the space. These are my main theories to why I think a gun wielding job was incoming, forthcoming, and they just abandoned it. They've never stated otherwise, but I think it's readily apparent based on the evidence we have in game that there was a job planned, they were working on it, and they abandoned it, or it probably turned into the machinist. But that's also why I think that a ranger or a similar gun wielding job is still possible, because they had an idea originally to add this job, they just abandoned it. So it's likely the concept is still there. So yeah, my opinion is that ranger is one of the most likely, or a gun wielder, not even called the ranger, a gun wielding physical range DPS is the most likely candidate for a new job. I'm of the opinion, from a lore perspective, the fact that these guys have disappeared, I think what probably happened is a guild once existed in this city that specialized in pistols and specialized in musket rifles, and suddenly they disappeared. Now we know why they disappeared for gameplay purposes. They didn't have the job ready, they weren't even going to hint that it was ready, so they removed the NPCs involved with it, but they left the overall scene dressing of the Coral Tower, which makes it look like there's a job here, but there's nobody here giving out quests over. But yeah, that's my reasoning for thinking that, in my opinion, from a lore perspective, what I think is this, right? I think I said this in the video as well. A guild of gun wielders once existed in this city, and suddenly they disappeared. They're not here anymore. They packed up and left in a hurry by the looks of it. I'm thinking maybe they exist in the new world. So maybe they were denizens originally from the new world, and then prior to 1.0 or 2.0, they packed ship and left back to the new world. So when the new world is finally added to FF14, we get the musket job added to the game. And look, there's a spot right here for this job to just come back into the lore. The space is all here waiting for them. Return to Wyrmlimion. You are needed. Yeah, that's my primary pick for a new range in FF14. However, whilst I was making my latest video, I'm still actually doing the editing of a new video at the moment. However, while researching it, I came up with the idea of another range DPS. And again, this new range DPS, I needed it to be unique enough from the other 3. And I think I solved it. And it's based on a certain character. I'm assuming the gentleman before you doesn't need an introduction, although I will introduce him anyway. Say hello to Xenos Viator Galvus, as he's currently known. Now, Xenos is a very unique figure in the weapons he wields, the arts he wields, and the unique nature of his toolkit and his fighting style. However, I will say here, I'm going to explain this in my next video, because my next video is actually about Xenos, but I'll quickly elaborate on it right now. The arts that Xenos wields at the moment are called the arts of the Unyielding Blade. So, the arts of the Unyielding Blade, they originate from Corvus. And it's primarily all stated in a short story in the Chronicles of Light. So this is never shown on screen or anything else. It's shown only in this short story, which is only unique to this book. Now, The arts of the unyielding blade, as utilized by a Corvosi tutor that tutored Xenos, specialized in using his sword to unleash energy attacks from his blade. Like, he channeled his aether into his sword got powered up, and it enabled him to utilize energy wave attacks from his sword at ranged. He usually wouldn't close distance between himself and Xenos, he usually just did his attacks from a distance. And that's when it occurred to me, could it be possible, with now Xenos out of the picture, he was one of, if not the last, with the ability to actually utilize the unyielding blades, because after he killed his tutor, the arts essentially died out. However, it's likely that Corvos is going to be added to the game again. So it's entirely likely that when we get access to Corvos once again, we could end up encountering an individual who retains the original arts of the unyielding blade. And from the best we can see, it relies a lot upon ranged abilities. So my theory is this, that the next class we get is some unnamed job that based around the arts of the unyielding blade, utilizing their sword to unleash energy attacks from range that are physical in nature. And as an added bonus, this job would actually be able to wield the scouting gear as well, because it acts like a melee, but it's actually at ranged, utilizing the swords to throw energy waves. The more I thought about it, the more it just made sense in my mind, just going, this is making more and more sense to me. But it might have just been skewing my thinking because I've been researching him so much. But it just kept making more and more sense in my mind that this could actually work. Something like that is unique and could stand apart from the other ranged DPS. It's so likely in my mind. It's so unique, it stands apart, and it could make for a very interesting job that could also wield the scouting gear that right now only the ninja occupies. And it's entirely a ranged DPS. It's a unique way of using a sword as well. Like, they may have a sword similar to a samurai sword, but it's all entirely ranged. Just by channeling, channel. But yeah, that's my third job for a ranged DPS. So Ranger is still one of my top picks, but now that I think about Xenos, now that he's RIP, because Corvos has been hinted severely, I think we're actually going to get something similar to him. I think it's on the cards that we could get a job utilizing the arts of the unyielding blade. And I'll be pleasantly surprised if it happens. We're going to get a lot of information about 7.0 at FanFest, that's a given. However, don't forget we're also getting a live letter. And that live letter is going to start to elaborate on patch 6.5. But this is also elaborating on 7.0 as well. So my first discussion topic regarding the Alliance raids and the main story quest. And is it the possibility of setting up more extraterrestrial encounters? Now, I created this discussion topic before the Hildebrand stories that were added in 6.45. I'm not going to spoil the Hildebrand storyline, because I know a lot of people probably haven't done it yet. So I'm not going to spoil too much. However, it has elaborated more on the extraterrestrial, like Poo Poo, for example. Love that name, by the way. But mainly, I've been thinking about all the other extraterrestrial encounters that we've had so far, but also from the Alliance raid and also from the Savage raids. Well, Athena specifically was a main plot point, and also the utilization of the Heart of Sabik and the spell Ultima. Now, when I was looking at the spell and I was researching for a previous video, something jumped out in my mind. So let me just create a new notepad here, just because. Now, as you know, with the Ultima spell, to cast Ultima, you have to use an incantation. Or at the very least, we've seen people use incantations in order to utilize it. We did see Athena one time not utilize an incantation, but the other two times we've seen incantations. So La Habrea was the first one we seen casting Ultima, and his incantation was, and from the deepest pit of the seven hells to the very pinnacle of the heavens, the world shall tremble. Then Athena did the same thing. From the deepest pit of the seven hells to the pinnacle of the heavens, the world shall tremble. When I was reading this, something jumped out in my mind, and it's specifically this section here. From the deepest pit of the seven hells to the pinnacle of the heavens. And Athena is an ancient, as we know, and she's utilizing this incantation, which she likely learned from the Heart of Sabik a long time ago. But the fact that she says seven hells is very interesting to me, because the only other place we've heard seven hells is in the modern era of the game. Like, for example, you'd hear Admiral Wyrm, for example, go seven hells. Like, it's a terminology that she and other people would use, like to go bloody hell or seven hells. Like, that's the version of bloody hell in my vocabulary. But it's mainly just pointing this out because seven hells is it's to do with the lore of the 12, because in my last video about the 12, as I noted in it, the 12 created the seven heavens in order for them to reside in, but when they created the seven heavens, they also created the seven hells below them. But this had me thinking, the fact that they said seven hells, is the incantation, or whoever developed this incantation, did they somehow believe in the seven hells, or a version of the seven hells? But this had me thinking about the Alliance raid and the 12. Is it possible that there is a connection between the 12 and Athena? And I already elaborated on some of this in my last video, but it's mainly the fact that this is mentioned in the incantation for the casting of the spell Ultima, and this incantation goes back thousands of years pre-Sundering. And the fact that the seven hells comes up as a terminology for the 12. It hasn't specifically been mentioned in-game, it's primarily only mentioned in the encyclopedia. Because right now we've only heard of the seven heavens, and we've only seen parts of the seven heavens. We haven't seen any mention of the seven hells yet. But it is part of the culture of the worship of the 12 that there's a heaven and there's a hell, or there's seven heavens specifically, and there's seven hells. And when somebody dies, they'll go before whichever deity they believed in, and they're judged worthy or unworthy depending on their crimes or their whatever, and they'll either go to one of those seven heavens or one of those seven hells depending on what you did, for example. But I just found it interesting that the fact that this is mentioned here and it ties into what we're learning about the 12, that there may actually be some connection between the two. And this is what led me to my next theory. Now, this is not a new theory. Other people have come up with this theory before. But the theory is, were the 12 sealed away in Lake Silvertear? Now, my reason for thinking about this is primarily based on Ultima the High Seraph, and the theory I just outlined before regarding the seven hells, and a possible connection between the Heart of Sabik, or Athena and Ultima, and the 12. This is what's making me think about this. Now, as I said, this is not a new theory. A lot of people have theorized for years, and even lately, that the 12 were actually sealed away, or locked away, or hibernating, or whatever we want to call it, in, around, or above Lake Silvertear. And as we learned in 6.1 with Omphalos, Omphalos is positioned very close to where Lake Silvertear is located. My point is, and I'll go back to Ultima now. Ultima, according to the lore of FF14, was an extremely powerful extraterrestrial being. There's a conflicting tale about Ultima. According to the legend, she was sealed away by the Mother Crystal, which ended up not being true. She was sealed away by Ramset and his allies. So, long ago, Ultima was summoned into the world in order to destroy a civilization in Ivalice. They quickly learned what she was, and Ramset and his friends were able to seal her away underneath the Oborn monastery in one of the ruins of the cities that she herself destroyed. Now, you're probably thinking, what's my point in all this? The reason she was sealed away is because she presented a very real threat to not only the people of the world, but the world itself, which is why she was sealed away. Now, she did break out. Naturally, we saw it. It was the main story of Return to Ivalice in the first place. We invaded the Oborn monastery, fought our way through all the protectors who were testing us, and then fought and defeated Ultima. Now, the main reason I'm thinking about this is because, based on my idea of a connection between Ultima, the past, and the 12, and the fact that the 12 only showed up now, makes me think that they were actually sealed away within Lake Silvertear. Now, if you recall from the trailer of 1.0, with the Battle of Silvertear Skies, with the Agrias Garlean ship versus Mikar Sormer and his horde, they're all fighting above. Mikar Sormer wraps himself around the Agrias crashes down into Lake Silvertear. There's a giant explosion, and then you see a bunch of primals get released. So you see Ifrit, you see Titan, you see a bunch of others all get spewed out, all flying around. But it made me think that the 12 were actually sealed away themselves. And is it possible that they're actually extraterrestrial in origin? Now, I have multiple reasons for thinking this. The first one is because Athena was going on a lot about gods, and stuff like that. Ultima describes himself as a god. She was worshipped as a god. And the 12 have made no qualms about declaring themselves gods incarnate. They're not primals. They've already said they're not primals. They said they're gods, specifically gods. It's entirely possible that the 12 were extraterrestrial, just like Ultima, and they ended up on this planet at some point in its history, likely after the Sundering, in my opinion. Ultima likely had some sort of influence on the planet pre-Sundering, but I think the 12 came after. And the main reason I do think that they came after is because after the Sundering happened, the universe was in a state of turmoil. Like, the final days was happening on other planets. We learned it just recently, that the final days happened on all other planets as well. And the effects mimicked what happened on Aetheris past and present, with the Terminus Beast rising up, people transforming into these abominations. So it's entirely possible that these beings were extraterrestrial in origin, like the 12 and Ultima, and they took refuge on Aetheris primarily because it was one of the only bastions of safe harbor in a chaotic universe. Now, I'll get back on point here, I promise. So, my theory was that they came to this planet, similar to how Ultima came to this planet, but they were sealed away by Hydaelyn within Lake Silvertear. She's pretty much a master at sealing powerful entities away, so she would have been sealed away. And then she managed to seal herself, but as more and more rejoining started to happen, her ability to maintain the seal over Lake Silvertear began to weaken. Coincidentally, Midgard Sormer then turns up at some point long ago, not long after the Sundering, if I think correctly. And she and Midgard Sormer, Hydaelyn, I'm talking about, Hydaelyn and Midgard Sormer make a pact with each other. We don't know what this pact was, but they did make a pact that in exchange for Midgard Sormer being able to settle on Aetheris and for his children to populate the world, he would be stationed, or he would settle himself at Lake Silvertear, and he had some sort of duty that we never heard about. He was the guardian of Lake Silvertear. That's what he's known as today. He's known as the guardian of Lake Silvertear. But we never knew why he was the guardian of Lake Silvertear. And we did see he took his job seriously. As soon as the Agrias threatened Lake Silvertear, he was up and about, stopping them from getting anywhere near it. Now, I'll get back on point here, I promise. I'm starting to ramble on a bit. So, the 12 are sealed away within Lake Silvertear. Hydaelyn gives Midgard Sormer the job of maintaining this prison, essentially. I'll just call it a prison for now. But after the events of 1.0 and Midgardsormr getting severely weakened, Hydaelyn would have had to take over management of the seal on Lake Silvertear again, because it was likely breached or broken, which is why a bunch of primals started leashing out. That has been retconned a little bit. Not fully, but a little bit. But the 12 would have been still sealed away under Lake Silvertear, and Midgardsormr for the longest time was sleeping either in or below Lake Silvertear. So when he was weakened, and then finally during Stormblood, Midgardsormr used up pretty much all of his energy, and he went into a full dormancy at that point. So he was no longer able to maintain his vigil over Lake Silvertear, so Hydaelyn took over again. But Hydaelyn was in a very weakened state by that point. And then with her now gone, the seal over Lake Silvertear was broken. Which is why we only see the 12 now, and coincidentally above Lake Silvertear. Their seal was broken, they emerged, they came out, which is also why their entrance is in Lake Silvertear. So that's my opinion. My opinion is that the 12 are playing the part of gods that are extraterrestrial in origin, came to the star long ago, for some reason were sealed in Lake Silvertear, and were released with Hydaelyn's demise. Or they possibly felt that they didn't need to be sealed anymore because there's no final days anymore. That could have also been their motivation to break out. But I certainly think that's a possibility, because the 12 are very suspicious right now. Like, they've been suspicious since 6.1. 6.1 and 6.3, we just go, right, they're so suspicious. There's something going on, but we don't know exactly what it is. But they need us for something, or we think they need us for something, but it's entirely possible they're also manipulating us. Which is what I think. They're not telling us the full truth when they could. So, I think there's some dark scheme going on. Before I get into the plot of 7.0, I need to talk about Garlemald first. Now, as I've mentioned in a lot of my other videos regarding Garlemald, the lore of Garlemald, the Garlean Empire in general, is heavily inspired by the history of the Roman Empire, specifically with the rule of the Caesars. And there's a lot of comparisons you can make between the Garlean Empire and the Roman Empire. For example, the legions are a prime example. Like the Garlean Empire has legions, the Roman Empire has similar legions made up in many of the same ways. A lot of the ranks that are used within the Garlean Empire were used by the Roman Empire as well. So I find that the fall example of Emperor Varus and the non-rule of Emperor Xenos as the entire empire fell into civil war, I think of it a lot like the fall of Emperor Nero. Now, if you remember your Roman history, Emperor Nero was the infamous emperor through which Rome burned under his watch. And Garlemald certainly did burn. Yeah, my accent was coming out there. Garlemald definitely burned after the fall of Varus and the Civil War. So there's a lot of comparisons to be made there. But the main reason I'm pointing this out is because now that the Empire is gone, Garlemald was free to take its next steps. Now, the last few patches were us looking after the main needs of the Garlean people. So specifically, you need food, they need a shelter. A lot of the patches have been based on that. And they've done a pretty good job of that. And the recent patch has enabled the Garlean people and their leadership to start getting on their own 2 feet. And this is all accumulating now, by the looks of it, into the reformation of the Garlean Republic. Garlemald used to be a republic long ago, until the invention of Magitech and then the rule of the subsequent emperors after the fact. So it used to be a republic, and then it became an empire, the empire fell, and it's looking very likely that's going to become a republic again, heavily based on the model Ishgard uses to govern its own society. They're already taking great steps to that, but this is looking like it is definitely going to become a republic and a proper face again on the world stage. Now this gets me to the plot of 7.0, and this is why I'm talking about Garlemald right now. So in order to talk about the plot of 7.0 in my mind, from what I think is going to happen, I need to talk about the Eorzean Alliance. So you can see Aldenard is here. This is the realm of Eorzea on the continent of Aldenard. So you have Limsa Lominsa, you have Gridania, and you have Ul'dah. And then, naturally, Alamigo and Ishgard over here. So the Eorzean Alliance long ago once existed, and then the societies kind of fragmented after the fact. And a lot of wars actually happened on this continent after the fact as well. But in recent times, particularly in the game's timeline, the Eorzean Alliance was refounded in order to combat the Garlean incursions into Aldenard, into the realm of Eorzea, which culminated in the Battle of the Cartano Flats. So the Eorzean Alliance became reformed after that fact between Limsa Lominsa, Ul'dah, and Gridania. Then with the events of Heaven's Ward, Ishgard was taken out of the hands of the church, and it's been reformed into a much better society, and has officially taken its place where it rightfully belongs as a member of the Eorzean Alliance. So the alliance went from 3 nations to 4 at that stage. Almost all of the major states of the continent of Aldenard. Unclouded Ilsabard. Yeah, damn truth. I really want this unclouded. Then the events of Stormblood happened. So Stormblood saw us liberate the nation of Alamigo. So this is the Eorzean Alliance I'm talking about. They liberated the nation of Alamigo with the help of the Alamigan resistance and also the help of Doma. So after the liberation of Alamigo, Alamigo became its own nation once again, and they officially joined the Eorzean Alliance, which solidifies this entire continent together once again, which hasn't happened for a very long time. And over on the other side of the continent, as you can see with Doma, despite not actually being in the realm of Eorzea, is counted as a member of the Eorzean Alliance, or if not a full-fledged member, a stalwart ally of the Eorzean Alliance, to the point where they're involved in all of our important meetings, negotiations, and the dictation of policy. We're literally joined at the hip between these 2 entities. So the Eorzean Alliance right now consists of all the major city-states of Eorzea and Doma. Now this leads us very neatly into the events that happened with the Garlean Empire. So as we all know, the Garlean Empire crumbled and fell, and it looks like the Garlean Republic is going to rise in its place. Now, because of all the help that the Ilsabard contingent has given to the Garlean people, and the Ilsabard contingent is a direct extension of the Eorzean Alliance, with the Garlean Empire having fallen, it left a power vacuum on this continent of Ilsabard. Now with the Republic going to actually form itself back up, they'll be once again ruling the northern part of the Ilsabard continent. The southern parts of the Ilsabard continent are going to come back into their own. They're no longer under Garlean control. They're going to become their own entities once again. The same is happening over in the Far East as well. Naxia is now free, Dalmasca is now free, all the other lands over here are now free of Garlean control or threat. So they're all coming into their own again. I was thinking about the land of Mericidia, the lands of the New World, and all the other lands that are possibly on the world stage outside of our viewpoint. So if you look at this, for example, this is a very powerful alliance that is currently now formed. So you have the entire continent of Aldenard, you have a large portion of the Far East, and more than likely these other states and nations within these borders are going to become at least allies with the Eorzean Alliance. And then with the Garlean Republic, once it forms itself, is more than likely going to declare itself a stalwart ally of the Eorzean Alliance. So if you were an outsider in any other continent beside the 3 great continents, what you'd see is these 3 continents coming together to become a massive superpower that has not been rivaled since the time of the Allegan Empire. Now, if I was a major power player, like a large nation in the New World or Mericidia, I'd be looking at this and going, I don't like where this is going. This is a major threat. I think this is something we're going to have to deal with. And this is where I get to the plot of what I think is going to happen in 7.0. Emmett Selk has mentioned the New World, and he has mentioned Mericidia. He has mentioned, in regards to Mericidia, that we don't know much about its present state of affairs. And it's true, we don't. For all we know, in the many years since we last heard from Mericidia, there could be a thriving, large, powerful nation, either on Mericidia or the New World. The New World we know has a very large civilization, but we only have scant, very little tidbits about it. But we do know that most of this New World continent is actually under the control, or influence at least, of one power. But here's what I'm thinking. I think war is on the horizon. I think that's what 7.0 is going to be. I think when that trailer launches next week, the teaser trailer, it's going to show that tensions are rising and that war is going to be on the horizon. And I think it's going to be either a power on the New World or a power in Mericidia that is looking at the 3 great continents and going, I don't like the fact that the Eorzean Alliance is now growing this powerful and this influential. We're going to do something about it. And war would likely happen between the 3 great continents under the banner likely of the Eorzean Alliance or some new entity and the New World of Mericidia. I think that's what's going to happen. That's my prediction of what the plot of 7.0 is going to be. I had a million other ideas of what 7.0 could have been, but thinking about this, the 3 great continents united, or at least allied together, I'd be legit shitting myself if I was the ruler of one of these nations on the other continents. Looking at this and just going, oh shit, what is going to happen to us? I don't like the fact that these empires are growing. If we look at our own history on planet Earth, wars have been started for the very same reason. You'd see an alliance of cities and states and countries growing too large, and countries around them, even continents, would feel directly threatened by it. Say for example, let me stand as the ruler of the nation that controls or influences the New World. I'm looking at the 3 great continents. In the last decade, we have seen the realm of Eorzea go from a splintered realm of multiple city-states to united city-states under a Northern Alliance. We have seen it liberate 2 separate city-states of their own in Garabania and Doma. We have seen the fall of an empire that threatened the entire world. We've seen that empire rise as a republic and then declare itself an ally of the Eorzean Alliance, which then controls everything. I would legit look at it and just go, they're a direct threat to us. It's almost like, it's like the Cold War all over again. It's like the New World is America and the 3 great continents are the Soviet Union. They're looking at it just going, Jesus, they're growing too big. I don't like where this is going. And then war is just going to go boom. So I think that's what 7.0 is. It's going to be a direct conflict on Aetheris, a war between continents. And it would be our excuse for going to the New World or Mericidia. Because we need a valid excuse, not just to explore. I mean, exploring is great, but we need a valid excuse to go to these 2 continents. A war breaking out between these continents and the 3 great continents and the Eorzean Alliance would be a excuse, a definite excuse. So that is my prediction for 7.0. I predict that the trailer will start off normal enough, and then it'll transition over to the New World or Mericidia with some king or just like official sitting on his throne, just going, looking at a map of the 3 great continents and just going, they've grown too strong. We need to do something about this. War is declared. Let's do it. Hope you're wrong. I don't want another Stormblood situation. That's also a good point. Like, people don't really want a war like that anymore, but just looking at the geopolitical situation, I just can't unsee it. Like, very soon, it's entirely likely, now that the Garlean Empire is gone, for example, Corvus has now become free and liberated. Naxia has become liberated. Dalmasca has become liberated. And any other state that was directly threatened by the Garlean Empire is now their own independent states once again. Alright, I'm going to finish everything there. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any more Scions, but I've gone over all the topics that I wanted to, including the jobs that I wanted to cover. I'll try and slice this thing up and upload it as soon as I can, although I'm still in the middle of my other video that I'm working on at the moment. But I will try my best. But other than that, I hope everybody has a great time. Enjoy your weekends, and don't forget, we have a week left. So we're going to find out exactly what's going to be going on right now in terms of the story, and also where the hell 7.0 is going to lead us. And I, for one, hope I'm right. I hope I'm right about at least one of my theories. So we're going to find out. Anyway, everybody, thank you very much, and I hope you have a great night and a great weekend.